what does Pan-Africanism mean to you?
Well, I think being aware of our history globally, not sectionize it and make it just national. Because yes, we have differences depending on where we grew up and where the diaspora took us, but we share a common foundation. And I strongly believe that we need to raise each other's voices. Using our voices for each other is going to really amplify where we can reach.
All right, you guys, let's get into first.
There is a movement promoting our stories, and many of us grew up with a strong craving for images we can relate to. Production teams, writers, creative heads have come together to tell stories, and this podcast is their voice. The themes covered are very relevant to the Black community, and anyone concerned by the social and racial injustices that are in place to stifle this voice. The Pan-African voice is not easily heard, and here we talk about our movies, that film or doc which you heard about but didn't get to see. What was the story? Where can I watch it? It now has a voice. Tune in. We walk you through these stories and interview the filmmakers. Welcome. Karibu sana. Karibu sana.
And starting right on the lens. Ready? And action.
Harlem.
Una volta ristabiliti, ho già in mente per te una carriera d'ambasciatore presso l'impero ottomano. Più gente con i tuoi capelli.
Se Dio continuerà a mostrarci i suoi favori, Firenze diventerà un ducato.
Duca Ippolito de Medici.
No, Duca Alessandro de Medici.
And I just want to introduce to everybody on the podcast, this is the Pan-African Film Podcast for another episode. We are introducing Daphne Di Cinto, also known as Sarah Basset, right, in the Netflix series Bridgerton. But today, on this episode, we're focusing on her directorial debut, right, which premiered this year, actually, at the Pan-African Film Festival in LA. And I'll just do a brief recap, Daphne, of your story, Il Moro, which is a short, and it translates to the Moor. It's an Italian film about the mysterious Duke, which was his nickname, the Moor. And it's a beautiful 22-minute short based on the life of Alessandro de Medici, who's the first Duke of Florence. But little is known of him, right? Because turns out he's actually mixed race, and he's son of a woman of African descent, and the Pope at the time, Clement VII, right? The themes, I guess, are historical drama, very old history here. We're talking, the 15th century?
1500s.
1500s, so 16th century historical drama, where is the backdrop, right? Is the setting that you've chosen to tackle, I guess, issues of representation, identity, So let's start with you, Daphne. Who's Daphne Di Cinto? Tell us a little bit, in your words, now that I've the formal.
That's a question I probably haven't figured out either, but we can just sum up the things that I like doing. And one of the things that I like doing is telling stories. And, the story of Alessandro de Medici has been such a blessing when it came into my life. I was born and raised in Italy. I've done all my school years in Italy up until I was about 23. So up until the first 3 years of university. And I was pretty good at school, so I'm pretty sure I paid attention, but I had never heard the story of the background of Alessandro de Medici. And for who isn't familiar with that part of history, in Italy, the Medici family is probably the most famous aristocratic family in Italian history. Mm-hmm. So as kids, we are told their story over and over and over.
Right. It's not like an unknown family. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, discovering the background of Alessandro much later in life has been a surprise. And the way I discovered it as well is quite funny, because I was browsing the internet doing some research and I came across an article, and the article was titled 10 People You Didn't Know Were Black. And there, among them, there was Alessandro de Medici, to which I was just really surprised. And that's when I started doing some research, and I started asking myself questions as what would have happened? How would my childhood and my teenage years and the building of my identity been different if I had been aware of this character inside of my own history, of the history of my country? And how would it have affected my schoolmates differently? I think they're two very important questions, because, primary school, secondary school, those are the times where kids form their identity and start forming their character and who they are and the way they see the world and approach other people. Did you grow up in Italy?
I did not.
Okay. So,
I experienced living there only permanently was mostly during my university career. Right. I was in Milan for about 5 years.
And, I feel like Milan
is different, right?
It's different. It already has.
Yeah, it's a very international, more international. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it has a very big community from Ethiopia and Eritrea. So I feel like growing up there, obviously there are going to be some issues, but you're not going to be the black sheep.
Oh, I was. The Bocconi back then was still in Italian. I was the only person in the whole course. They introduced the English course 2 years in, and then more black people, but and there was one other couple, they quit.
Whoa.
I met them. I was so happy, and then they quit. And then there was one other girl, but she was kind of Cuban by origin, but born and raised in Genoa, second, third generation Italian. Really wasn't the same relation wise, but that was my experience. I think it's different growing up there. And I think it was a different time also, maybe we have some age difference, because a lot happened after, during my period there was also when the EU was being formed. So I was studying, I came in with the lira and left with the euro.
Oh, wow.
A lot of changes. Yeah. Big changes for Italy at that time.
Yeah. So I feel like, I grew up in a small town in the province. So very far out. Everybody knew each other, that kind of thing. And I already, character-wise, wasn't the most social person.
Okay.
You can imagine what the first years in school were like. But, there are some things that happen to you in those years that, as much as they're not going to hinder your growth, there are small scars that you will bring along, even if you're unaware of them. And the way certain kids approached me and spoke to me is something that, yes, for most of my life, I've tried to forget, was very successful at forgetting. But there has been a moment very recently, actually, where it all kind of came out. And I think a lot of us really were brought to reflection in the past 2 years because of everything that has happened globally. And at a certain point, I realized that I had spent my whole life shutting up and trying to justify myself. And I just realized that I didn't want to do it anymore, and that I had shut up for too long, and it was not the time to stay quiet anymore. And the story of Alessandro kind of was a bridge between those two eras of my life, because I started writing what was, because I've written and it changed so much now, but I wrote a pilot for a potential TV series, because Alessandro de Medici's life is so rich. It's short, but very intense. And I thought, well, there's enough material in there for a series, and it'd be such a beautiful story to see and a beautiful character to explore. And then in June 2020, I found myself back in Italy, and I kind of got stuck between the first lockdown and the second lockdown over here. And since I had to stay, I started reflecting, and I started telling myself, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to wait for, a big production company to come in and eventually take this story and make it into something? Or can I do something now? And I've wanted to direct for quite a long time. And this just kind of all came together and seemed like the timing was perfect. So I wrote a short film and brought together an incredible team of talent, and we made it happen.
Yeah, you surely did bring it to life in a very beautiful way. So congratulations, because it was a moving story. It's enlightening, like you said, it's inspiring. And I think you kind of answered, my first question, which was kind of how this idea came about. And it actually just came about by chance, despite you being raised in Italy, going to school in Italy, having read. And I think there's other shows about the Medici family, like even on TV. Yeah, there's so many, right? Yeah. Never have you heard like the first Duke was Black, right?
Well, it's crazy. I mean, funny enough, the TV series, the one we all know because of Netflix, it actually stops, I believe, the generation right before Alessandro. And a really sad story is that to this day, if you go to Florence, to Alessandro de Medici's tomb, and we're talking the first Duke of Florence, he's not, this dude that just passed by and left, the first Duke of the city. His tomb is not marked. Like, you will go and visit this monumental chapel. So basically, he's buried in the same room as Lorenzo the Magnificent, his brother, and Lorenzo de Medici, the Duke of Urbino. So I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but when sorry, spoiler, but this is actually not in the film. This is just history. The short doesn't get there, but spoiler about the life of Alessandro de Medici. He gets murdered. Very sad. It's really sad also kind of thinking of what has been happening in the past week in Italy too. But after that, he gets thrown into the tomb of Lorenzo de Medici, the Duke of Urbino, because obviously they didn't want Florence to discover that the Duke had been murdered because they were scared of an uprising. And Lorenzo, the Duke of Urbino, was officially Alessandro's father, because, didn't look great, for the Pope to be his father. So he got thrown in there, and only after days, his murderer, who basically was one of his distant cousins, once he was out of the city, he started telling people, well, I murdered the Duke. And then he wrote a book called The Apology, apologizing for murdering the Duke. But, giving his reasons, saying the Duke was a tyrant.
Justifying the actions.
Yeah, saying he was a tyrant, and he actually freed the city from that.
Wow.
Isn't it a crazy story? But what really blows my mind is that to this day, we still don't recognize him and his figure. If you go around Florence, there are some really interesting corners where you can find pieces of his story, but they're hidden. And most of his paintings, portraits, portraying his life and his role in the city of Florence, are in a room that is not accessible to the public because it actually is the mayor's office. That's all very interesting.
Oh, that's convenient. Yeah, like this happens to be in my private office. Well, I'm sure that, it being an Italian story, like probably near home for you, and, it's probably kind of hits home different, right? When you came, and clearly you've done extensive research onto his life and came to realize, how deeply buried it's so the intentionality with which the information is withheld, manipulated, changed, hidden, and all of that. For me personally, like I've researched so much different stuff. It's like it's all part of a system that is it's just more evidence on what, I know there to be in terms of institutionally erasing our history and our achievements and our glory, our excellence, in everything we can be, because of the threat that usually imposes, I feel.
Yeah. And I just keep on thinking it's so funny. They perceive us as a threat. I keep on saying, we wouldn't be as bad as you guys. And especially when it comes to Italy. Well, so, back in the 1500s, what's really interesting is that Alessandro's issue in society wasn't that he was Black, but that he was of low birth, because racism didn't exist the way it exists today, right? But then what happens is that when racism takes foot in the, in the 1700s, there starts to be systematic erasure, even of previous history that could be included in,
right,
could be labeled Black history. And Italy today is in a very interesting situation. The government just fell, and it fell. And I'm not saying that this
again.
is why. Again, what's new?
Yeah.
But the government was actually about to deliberate on a law that would have finally allowed more than 1 million second-generation Italians who at the moment live in the only country they call home without citizenship to finally have citizenship. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in Italy, if both of your parents are immigrants and don't have citizenship, even though you were born in Italy, you don't get citizenship. And you can only apply for citizenship once you turn 18. And it is not a given that you're going to get it the day after. I know personally people that are in their 40s and are still dealing with paperwork. It's huge. And the impact it has on over 1 million Italians is huge. We're talking about kids that have never gone to the country of their parents. They were born here, raised here, speak the language, absorb the culture. They're Italian. And the fact that the country has a problem in recognizing them is mind-blowing. That's a part of the reason why I wanted to tell the story of Alessandro. I felt like there was a strong parallel to what is happening today. And Alessandro being dismissed because, he was of low birth. And, all these Black Italian and second-gen Italian being dismissed as non-Italian. And the man becomes the first Duke of Florence. And Florence was one of the most important cities back then. So I just really want people to watch the film and be inspired and be energized and know that they shouldn't give up, because no matter what, they still have everything they need to rise in life.
Yeah, I mean, identity is like a really important part of the film. And obviously things like the, immigration issues that Italy is facing today, it's just, like you said, crazy that they're so relatable to, such a long history. I really personally felt Alessandro's identity crisis in the film. It was expressed beautifully, like with the music, the scene setting, everything. And I assume you're of mixed heritage yourself. Is that what connected you most with the film?
Yes, it was part of it. I mean, for me, it was so beautiful to see that somebody that looked like me had such an important role in my history. I mean, I spent my childhood being told that people like me weren't in my history. And now I find this person, and he's the first Duke of Florence, and Florence is the center of culture in 1500 Europe. So yeah, there was a strong connection there. And I really felt like that voice should be heard.
And congratulations. I was saying earlier, you just won another award in Italy. Like you was explaining it being in Italy. And I keep repeating that because I do find like there are differences, obviously, in achievements in terms of like equality and our rights. It's such a different dynamic. Even I would say the rest of Europe, let alone, the US where I am, because it being that kind of first port of entry, right? From how most immigrants come into from Africa up north at the moment. It's a different dynamic. And I just, wanted to ask you, like, why did you choose, for example, to debut at the Pan-African Film Festival in LA? And, what does Pan-Africanism mean to you?
Well, we didn't have much of a choice as far as festivals, because with festivals, you get accepted or not get accepted. And it just so happened that our first in-person screening was going to be the Pan-African. But I'm so incredibly blessed because the Pan-African Film Festival is such an incredible institution that fosters Black history and not just African-American history, which I think is very, very important. Being aware of our history globally, not sectionize it and make it just national. Because yes, we have differences depending on where we grew up and where the diaspora took us. In America, you guys, your voice is so much stronger than ours. And I really hope that you can help us. And I know it's hard because we all have our issues, but I also believe that using our voices for each other is going to really amplify where we can reach. When it comes to Pan-Africanism, well, I think what it's been meaning for me is more and more of a connection to my roots and to a part of myself that for the longest time I wasn't able to explore. And learning about the diaspora in all its forms and where it took people globally really, in my opinion, informs the globality of our presence and the fact that we shouldn't really accept to be called a minority.
That's an interesting perspective. So you don't feel like a minority in Italy?
Yeah, I feel like we're treated like minorities because that's the story we've been told our whole life. But if we take a global perspective, are we a minority?
Right. I see your point. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Why are we marrying the story that we've been told from? Who decided who's the minority and who's the majority? Who decided what's the meter of judgment? And the thing is that words are powerful. And I think we really need to think how we want to define ourselves.
Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, I've actually never flipped it that way at all. I mean, I love the Pan-African perspective. You are on the Pan-African Film Podcast for a reason. As you said, personally, I've lived I'm part Italian, but also in the UK, I've experienced the Black experience there, and then in the US. So I totally get what you're saying about it being more encompassing and inclusive. But you're right. So like once we do group that way, then we automatically eliminate identifying as a minority in our presence, in our how we even present ourselves, right? That's just a beautiful perspective. Thanks for sharing and for adding all of this to us, to the podcast, and sharing your perspective. Can you tell me a little bit more about the production process? It is your directorial debut. I'm guessing you're passionate about filmmaking in general. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and what was the most exciting part for you?
So it's been such a journey. First of all, everybody in filmmaking will tell you that it is nuts to do your first project as a period drama. It's just not something that is done. And I understand why, because it's expensive. And it's expensive to do it well. We were very lucky because I managed to secure things that normally are very pricey, basically for free, like location and costumes. And my actors, so my two protagonists, Alessandro and the Pope, are actually A-listers in Italy. They're super talented, and they came on board, giving us a massive discount. And a lot of people saw the value of the project, and that's why they decided to either lend themselves or really, work with us. But yes, so the way it started was just, by writing the short and writing something that I knew we could shoot, well, I guess with limited funds. And then there was a process of funding, which was long and very tiring. But again, I've been incredibly blessed because I've met people that saw my vision and wanted to be a part of it. So we're lucky enough to raise enough to be able to start production. And it's been magical. Like, I can think of so many moments. Well, the first day of set was brutal for me. As you can imagine, the first day there are so many issues, so many things going wrong. And, it's my first time directing, and I have a crew of people that have been in the industry for 20 years. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I don't know what I'm doing. I think they kind of like realized I didn't know what I was doing afterwards. And the other days, the following days were amazing. And we formed a really close-knit team, and we really drove home. I'm really proud of what we could do in just 4 days. And I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, if I wanted to do things exactly how I wanted to do them, I would have needed 6 days minimum. But we had 4. That's all we could afford.
Right.
That's what the locations granted us. And so we had to make it work. So there are things that are not exactly how I want them, but I think I'm happy for my directorial debut.
Congratulations. It was wonderful. Phenomenal. What do you expect to or hope to achieve with the film? Like you mentioned, you'd started off like with the TV series pilot. Like now that you've moved into a short, it's obviously doing wonderfully at the festival route. But what are your ultimate plans?
Yeah, the plan is still to turn it into a series.
Oh, okay.
I'm working on it. Fingers crossed.
Okay, so that you're still sticking to the vision of it, telling his life more completely and full. Yeah. That's wonderful. I encourage everyone to check out the trailer, Il Moro, the film. Yeah, once you get a taste of it, you'll definitely want to see more.
Thank you. Yeah, so everybody can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Il Moro Film. So you'll find us there, and we'll post screenings and we'll post news, so you can keep up to date over there.
Yeah, and good luck with developing all of that, because, yeah, I personally definitely want to see it. And hear more about that story. It was just really wonderful for me as well, like to see that out there, maybe as an older generation, when that was so remote for that to ever happen in Italy, right? Yeah. It's great to see now the first happening there, as you described, and just to give the audience a little bit more of an understanding, as you mentioned, like just the Black experience in Italy is kind of like so, in its infancy stage, right? In comparison to, say, in the US, and in terms of formally establishing, as you say, like legal rights and
basic
integrating immigrants and things like that. I remember that when I was there, it was just, and this was a very long time ago again, like we're talking like the late 90s, right? So it was very few people who actually even experienced that one-on-one. And I can totally relate to you when you describe a small village setting where you literally are the only Black face. I know my dad actually comes from a small village down south, which is probably from that region you're from, because we were in Puglia, and we 100% when we visited, because we'd visit and stuff. I just never lived there, right? But definitely, my mom was the first Black woman who set foot in that town square, and it's like almost comical, as you said. It is a different kind of experience. So I just wanted to lay that kind of foundation to the audience.
Yeah,
but it's amazing to know that that's not their first Black experience, really. When you know, it's just like the term model itself was kind of somehow justifying as if it wasn't really a Black person. Those were Black people, who were in Europe.
Yeah.
At those times. And you did not consider them inferior at that time. You didn't label them slaves, at that time. There were other ways of demeaning and undermining our rights. That was always the scenario, right?
Actually, to keep on expanding on giving context, I just want to mention, because I think that this is something for Americans that can really explain what the situation is like here. Up until last August, so August last year, it was actually considered totally okay to do blackface on national TV prime time. And last August, somebody finally spoke up and said, maybe we should just stop doing this. And there has been a humongous row amidst, presenters and TV personalities saying, why can't we do it? We're just having fun. So this is where we're at in Italy. It's going to take a while, but we're working on it.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. It was so beautiful for me to see Il Moro, because I was like, yes, finally these things are happening, and then I mentioned to you earlier, like my kids, my mom, I have people and family in Italy still now. And it's nice to see. And I'm seeing, new shows, like things are definitely changing, right? But as you say, it's not everyone who's aware of how and what kind of progress stage we're at in each region. And I do think it's worth an additional investment, as you say, in just saying, hey, we are going to be the ones that take us and elevate us out of a minority situation. So if you rise, we have to all rise together, because leave no one behind, right? So be aware is my message, and take away from here, we're all evolving and we're all growing. It's so beautiful to see Il Moro, the nickname itself and all. The other thing I wanted to ask you was about the language, and your choice of, going for the original language subtitled. What elements affected your decision to then go for that? And then how do you think that's going to impact its current and future?
My very first idea was to shoot it in English because I wanted it to have the widest possible audience.
Right.
And then while I was casting and after, I found my actors, it kind of went without saying that we were going to do it in Italian because it was everybody's first language, and it just felt right at the moment because we were also so we've shot in 2 medieval castles. One of the castles was actually property of Pope Clement VII back then.
Oh,
so
how's that for authenticity?
Thank you. So, being in there and having all these strong elements that were kind of, giving us the foundation to build on, it felt like we had to honor the story that way and, do it in its original language. And Italian is beautiful.
Listen, I wanted to ask that question. I wanted to write it down when I was watching it, but then I forgot what the line was. There's this one line and I was like, yeah, that is so lost in translation.
Oh, which one?
I can't remember it for the life of me now. It's Il Moro. I was it was not in the trailer, so it's a different line from what's on the trailer. But I think it's delivered by him, by Alessandro's character. And it's just it was so authentic, that it was I see how, you've got to go for the audience appeal.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's so much, especially on TV now, that's subtitled. And I guess it's also an opportunity. I'm just throwing it out there to consider dubbing, as an option. I watched an Italian show, and I loved it. I think you've probably heard of it. There's a couple now, my kids were watching Summertime. That was cute. But there was the other one, Zero.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was really well made. And they used dubbing. That kind of helped for me. Or if not for me, because I speak Italian, right? Personally. But I think an audience, audience appeal is a little bit more elevated. It's a little more, especially if you get good voice actors. And again, it's like, for me, I'm always in favor of that because it promotes the voice acting community.
For sure. I mean, I'm a bit on the fence when it comes to dubbing, because I feel like with dubbing, there's so much that is lost in the choices of an actor. And then obviously a good dubber, knows how to replicate. But for me,
well, I mean, you can turn it on and off right now as a feature. So it's just to keep the best of both worlds.
It's an option.
It's an option. Yeah.
I guess, in order to make it accessible to most people, I'm in favor of dubbing. I will always choose to watch a film in original language, but also I'm very used to it. A lot of people aren't. So, we want to have a dish for everybody. So.
Yeah, I'm excited. Bring it on. And you're continuing anything else you're doing at the moment that you can share with our audience that you're working on? And I mean, apart from the other thing.
Yeah, funny enough, you mentioned comedy earlier, because I'm working on a half-hour comedy series that is set in Italy, and it's about two Afro-Italian sisters. I can't really say anything else, but I think it's going to be great. So, stay tuned.
That's exciting. And that's still not, because you so talented on so many levels. It's not as an actor, that's as a at
the moment I'm writing. So we'll see what happens after.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thanks again. I'm just going to stop the recording and letting everybody know that how wonderful it's been to have Daphne Di Cinto. Again, that's Daphne, Daphne, Di Cinto, Dicinto. Just in case anybody's looking out for you from our diverse audience out there. And thanks again for joining me. Good luck with everything, with Il Moro and yourself personally. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for having me.
And another one. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Pan-African Film Podcast. We are now on Spotify and Instagram. Just search Pan-African Film Podcast to follow and like us there. Our new platform is 360 Africa. That's 360 Africa. And we want to thank our Kenyan Vibe partners. Shout out to the KV squad. Last but not least, we thank our editor Ace. Please send us your feedback, follow, and comment.